We're really far behind time, so I'm going to let you go.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get started. Absolutely. So Betsy was talking about, if you remember the last session, which I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces, so it's good. Betsy came from a PM background, Oscar came from development, I came from a VA product owner perspective. So you're kind of getting different perspectives here, but when they invited me to speak, I actually hesitated because I'm not a PM, I didn't come from that background, what am I going to say that's going to help them? But I started thinking about it more, and I realized that one of the biggest shifts for a PM would be this large body of work where you see this huge Gantt chart, you have it all mapped out, ready to go, you know your end date projected. And then I was sitting here going, oh my God, what if I made a mistake? What if I didn't think of something in time? What if I forgot about a requirement? Like, that's the date, and they're going to turn it red if I forgot something and want to put something in, right? So the whole thought process, I wanted to kind of enlighten you and what it feels like to be on the side where you're actually coming up with the requirements and you're feeding this to the development team and how that progress works. And so when I was invited to a product owner training, that was my first introduction to Agile, I heard it and this light bulb went off. Yes, I don't know what I want 6 months from now. This is awesome. I know about what I want, right? I have an idea, but I don't know it to be, there will be an add button on this page, right? So, and I don't quite know it to that level. So this gave us, an opportunity to really think iteratively. So I just wanted to really bring that to the group and how you understand that side of it. But I'll also put it in context as well as to how this will work and how you can help facilitate. Just a little bit more about me. I have spent over 5 years being more of a product owner proxy, business analyst for Agile teams. So I do have quite a bit of experience working with Scrum Masters, some fantastic ones, some awful ones. So, but I can share with you what we need from Scrum Masters in order to work, and that's exactly what we're here for. So what is the common struggle? And I will be honest, this happens to product owners too. Where do we start? I know big picture, what I want, but how do I get it into a 2-week piece of work, right? Where do I even start to begin? And so, what do I even release first? Usually we release at the end, and it's everything, and everything works well. What can I release to my users or my customer now, and then continue to build on later? What is that first piece? And then even in 2 weeks, sometimes you're asking for way too much, because you're thinking of, the Mercedes-Benz instead of the Ford, right? You're thinking of something that's very elaborate, thought out, or you can really get out the door with something that works for you. So, what you guys traditionally are used to, if you haven't transitioned, is something where you know that you wanted this car at the end, so you just built the plan accordingly. That's what you said you wanted. That's what the business said they wanted. They wanted a car. They're going to be happy when they get it, and we'll just plan accordingly and march towards it. Nothing wrong with that plan, except for the business may not know, was that really what I wanted? They're guessing to a degree that that's what the users want. But also, they may find something else that they like as they're iterating. So if you look at the bottom, no, the skateboard, they have an upside-down smiley face here, that they don't like it. But think about it, though. If that's all you needed, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than a car. Think about if you could have used the skateboard. All you needed to do was get to the end of the block. You're done, right? Your project's done, you can move on to the next thing, because you got there. You didn't need a car to get there, right? But let's say that it was 2 miles away. Skateboard's not going to cut it, right? So you continue to think, and you continue to iterate, but you built your foundation of, okay, we're getting from point A to point B. That was our goal. That was our value of being able to move. But through the iterations, you got a little bit more sophisticated. You got a bicycle, you got a motorcycle. And then you realize you really liked the open air. Customers loved it. So if you look at the end, you ended up with a convertible. So you realize that progression of learning what your customers want. You learned from what you just did. You continue to add on. You might get a little more expensive, a little bit more fancy, but you actually learn. So, okay, none of us are probably building cars in this room. Maybe we are. It sounds like I was going to manufacturing. But I think about an example of I was a product owner. I have a sales organization telling me, we've got all these videos. We want our customers, we're building a customer portal, we want our customers to be able to have these videos. And they wanted content management. They wanted only videos that were associated with that user to show up. They wanted all this fancy behind the scenes kind of predictability. Have they seen it? Yes, they've seen it. Now we're not going to show it to them again, right? So you would traditionally, you would go build all of those requirements. You would have content management in it. You would know who your users are, what they've seen. Have they seen this one? This is what's important. So we said, okay, in our first iteration, we just put a video player, and we just put videos. We said, I just want videos that anyone can see. We had 2 clicks, a among 20,000 users. Okay, they don't want it. They didn't want it. They didn't want to watch a video. They came to the site for other reasons that were not to watch videos, right? See, and then if you knew the industry, you knew that they weren't going to do it. But think iteratively, how much money and time would have been invested. The only reason why we did it wasn't really even to question the sales team. It was really just to think iteratively. Let's put something out there that we can get out quick in 2 weeks. It was a plug-in. We had our content management system already in place. It wasn't based on users, but it held content. It got this content to the site. But think about how much money would have been wasted if we had done full requirement. So then we moved on and we said, okay, maybe there's a different avenue that we can get these videos to these users, and it's not this, right? So it's not that their point was not valid, it just wasn't the right avenue. The other thing is you don't build in the future. So one thing that you notice seeing, you knew you were building for the car. So up top, you're building this infrastructure that you can't use because you're building it for something so big that later, if you don't end up using it, you have potentially code and effort that just comes unused. So that's another benefit to Agile is you're using it as you go, and you're not overbuilding, overcomplicating. I worked with a group that was doing big data, and they were moving massive amounts of data, and then their graph would have like 4 data points. And so I was like, why are we bringing all this data in, and the graph you wanted was only 4 data points? Well, because they're going to use it in the future. Okay, well, let's not do that. We don't know if they're ever going to use it in the future. So, thinking that way, that amount of effort, queries, and moving data, that's a lot of effort for, especially a big data team, right? So, all right, so if you start to realize, you're trying to empathize with me, I see a lot of head nods, right? All right, but you don't have your project plan anymore, right? Because you're not sure, you're realizing, I don't know what I want 2 steps away. So how do we get there? And so Agile has 5 steps of planning. And if you think about it from a perspective of Agile planning versus project planning or Gantt charts or dependencies, that sort of thing, and you get to this level, a lot of people skip road mapping. So they think, I know my vision, I want a new customer portal, I want a new e-commerce site, right? You have your vision typically, no matter what kind of project. And then they go immediately down to trying to do the release of the sprint planning. And it's hard to make that shift. And teams that skip this roadmap site or step really miss out on the thinking, the prioritizing, the thinking iteratively, deciding what they want now versus later in that shift. So the term when, it's a little bit misleading. I would say what to look for here, like when do you do each of these? As a Scrum Master, you want to know that your team has work coming. And so your most priority is to make sure from a daily and a sprint level they know what they're doing, they have it ready. Definition of ready is the business has signed off on what they want. But remember, it's just little pieces. They know what they want at this point. So you're really protecting these bottom layers, but you're also watching for these top layers. If business doesn't know what they're doing in a month, your team's going to run out of work really quick. So it's sometimes a facilitation, and that's where I was saying earlier that good Scrum Masters are watching. When I was a BA with this team, we had a fantastic Scrum Master, and she would watch, and she knew as a BA if I had my work ready or not. She was watching and saying, do you have this vetted through with the architects? Do you have this vetted through with the different stakeholders? Because she knew that we were going to get to a point that we weren't going to be able to start. So as a Scrum Master, you're just watching and helping and encouraging the work to get there. From a roadmap perspective, you're really only looking at 1 to 3 months in detail. But you could be looking at, this is where I said the when is a little misleading. The 1 to 3 months is, I want to know in the next 3 months what I need to get done. But you also may be projecting 12 months from now, because you're giving ideas. They're very high level. You have some thought to it, so don't take that too literally. All right, so what is a roadmap? So this is the fun part. This is what I call a Christmas list. Just give me everything you want. As a business, bring all the stakeholders together. If they're on different parts of the country or even different parts of the world, bring them together, whether it's digitally or virtually, or hopefully even bring them in for a more 2-day session all together, where they're really building out all the feature sets of what they need. And make it fun. Have note cards, have a whiteboard. Make it very focused on what you're doing as far as this is what you need. But this is very high level. If you notice, this list is very easy to visualize what you're doing. These are my categories. This is what I want to do. So let's go through it. This is a travel site. And there's transportation management where you can have you can buy your air, your rental cars, but then it gets more you're diversifying yourself from the market by getting more into entertainment, saying things like, I want to buy concert tickets when I travel. I'm going to go for a trip to Austin, and I want to buy concert tickets while there, as well as my rental car and my airfare. These kinds of things are add-ons later, and kind of pie in the sky Christmas list things, but they're starting to form what you are and what your product is. And so from this step, you have your Christmas list, but now you have to figure out, okay, well, what do I start with, right? So this is where the business has to start to say what's more important. So this traditionally, you would have taken all of this, put it in a project plan, and you would have projected out $2 million, and you would have said it'll take 18 months, and you would have had an idea of how to get all of it done. And I know there's some caveats in there, maybe you don't have $2 million, so you have to cut scope, that kind of thing. But the point is that you would have taken all of this. But now, what the business is going to do is they're going to start to prioritize it. And so when they start to look at each of these things, they're going to start to put value on them. What do we get out of the gate with, right? What do I need to get started? I can't just go, well, they might make the decision of selling concert tickets first and then adding airfare. They may decide to start with airfare and add concert tickets later. They have to decide where they want to start, what they want to get out the door with first. So they're going to start to do prioritization. So how many of you, go ahead.
I was going to say, how often do you do that with that broader set of stakeholders? Is it periodic, so you update it?
Oh, yes, you're definitely
Once a
updating.
year, 3 times a year?
That's a really good point. Okay, so this is, I would say, a kickoff to a new initiative, if you think of it just like what you do today. Agile teams, ideally, you would have them on the team and you would just keep going, right? So you keep feeding them work. So you might do it periodically. It just depends on how long your roadmap is. If the roadmap lasts a year, I would say you're checking in on it very, very frequently, but when you go to that next year, when you start planning, you might start planning in like July, August for the following year. So it just really matters your scale of how much you're planning at once. And this is good. Good question. We can keep going. All right. So a lot of times, unfortunately, with prioritization, it's these different formats, right? Whoever has a bigger title gets what they want, or whoever gives more money to the project gets what they want. You might be dealing with squeaky wheels just to get them off your back, like the sales team with their video player, right? So, but there's some better methodologies out there for prioritization. So one of the things that a lot of times we resort to is high, medium, low. And if you think about high, medium, low, what does low tell you? If you were going somewhere and you wanted something, and it was going to take you 6 months to get it, low doesn't mean that I don't ever want it. Low just means I might want it later. And so Moscow kind of tailors to that a little bit, where you're looking at it and saying, I must have this to get out the door. I should have this if it's possible, but I can wait till the next release sort of idea. I could have it. It doesn't affect anything, negatively, but it would be nice to have it. And then I don't need it right now, I'll just get it later. And so if you really focus on that, and sometimes I even consolidate in the middle too when I'm working with business partners, to say, what do you want now? What should we strive for? Maybe a stretch goal. And then what can we do later? And you continue to iterate through that. And then, go ahead. Sorry.
So this is the IT people looking at this, or you're collaborating with business?
And collaborating, yeah.
So I ask this because if they're saying everything is high or top priority, which is like 50 things, and then you're trying to narrow it down, and then you fight back and forth like that. I'm thinking, I like this model, but I don't know if I would have a business person tell me, it's okay if you don't have time for this. You know what I mean? Like that part I feel like would be on the IT side saying we don't have capacity or resourcing to, you know what I mean? Can you on that?
Well, it's a collaboration, so you're a very good point. So the business person might think they need all of it, but reality says you don't have time for all of it. So what I've done is I've gone through then the must-haves, the should-haves, and the we'll do later. And if the must-haves is this big and the we'll do later is this big, all right, well then now force rank what's in here and tell me where the cutoff is. Because when they start to force rank, it's real easy to look at everything individually, but when they start to force rank them, they realize the order of priority. And then you can work and collaborate with them to say, okay, this will take about 3 months. Our velocity says, if you start having conversations, you don't know exact timing, but you give them an idea of what you can get into a certain time frame, and they start to realize where that cutoff can be for a release. Same thing. So it might not just be Moscow that you use. Business value, SAFE really drives this. They have an algorithm. I love it. I think it's great, as long as you really can put a number to your business value. If it just starts to be subjective, you might as well just use one of these others, because it's just a gut reaction anyways. And then the algorithm kind of creates a little bit more complexity that's just based on subjective numbers, right? But if you can put ROI, you know how business value definitely could be a way, and then technology risk. This is actually a really good one. So I have an example. Think about we were going to bring all these portals together. If we couldn't have done single sign-on between the 5 of them, it was just dead in the water because the user was not going to log in every time they clicked on a tab, right? It was just bad experience. So we came out of the gate just building single sign-on, and all it got when it single sign-on was a page that said successful. That was our first demonstration. So the idea is, though, we knew we were dead in the water. We weren't going to waste any money building this entire thing. And the IT team didn't know if they could bring many different types of portals together. They're all a little different. Security was a little different. So put that at the top. So if you think about it from business value, it's kind of a dull demo. But at the same time, you now have that reassurance that, all right, we're good. We're not going to find this 6 months from now when we go to release it, right? So there's also that. That's not going to happen every time you come out with a project. You're not going to have something that's technology risk, but if you do, try and put it in the front. Whether you do a proof of concept or you can actually deliver it, there's different ways of managing that. Any questions on this? So you brought up a really good point as far as prioritization, and that forced rank is what you're going to use. So no matter what, even if they do a fantastic job of separating everything out as a bell curve, nice little bell curve, you still have to force rank because the next idea is to start slotting, okay? So one big thing, though, is to remember, we said they really know what they want for 1 to 3 months. So they're going to know this section a lot better than this section. And these are just discussions with the group. They're just ideas. Hey, we're going to shoot for this in third quarter. And then as you progress and as you learn more, they might say, oh, my customers don't want this. We're hearing they want something else that's out in the market. They want to be on smartphones or they want an app. Well, this goes away and they bring in an app. Okay? So Betsy and Oscar talked a lot about what happens if the product owner wants to change course. Well, it doesn't matter. It's just on a PowerPoint slide up here, right? So it's the horse trading. There might be a little bit of that because there might be budget constraints, time constraints, and that's fine. That's all within normal day. But the idea is that you take a look at what you have projected, and it's not set in stone. They can switch it out as long as you haven't started the sprint. That's the only thing that's set in stone is that sprint. Okay? So that's all you have to protect. If I have an idea here, and I have to go to a change request, and I have to go beg for dollars, and I have to, when in reality it's just the equal and on a page, and I can just switch it out. Think about like that collaboration and how it feels. There's not this wall between me and I had to guess what all my users are going to want 6 months from now. Apple just had their developer conference. What if I wanted to incorporate something from that? I couldn't have projected that 6 months ago that they were going to use iMessage. I was on a fantastic call yesterday internally, talking about all the ideas for customers and how they can use it. And I would hate to know that my product owners couldn't have, hear from us those ideas, and they have to think 18 months from now they can maybe use it. So, it's those kinds of things that pop up, and it's like, oh, let me go do this. Okay. So the other thing is on this side, yeah.
So, I know you might get to this later on in the presentation. More than happy to table the question. What you're describing is a significant shift in how the business and sponsorship starts to think about what they're asking for. We've got 40 years of history of people having these massive ideas that we know take 3, 5, 10, 15 years to actually implement. They're typically whole change out platform and infrastructure. Will you address, or would you mind taking a couple minutes to address the transition in teaching as an IT shop, so self-shows you from an IT place, how to teach your customers to think differently about how they consider their own evolutions back into operating this kind of structure?
Yeah, no, that's very good. And I kept this high level for a reason. I'm actually going faster than I thought I would. So we can definitely dive into questions. I would say there's things like agile coaches that, like, if it's a complete revolutionary idea to the organization, that I would actually recommend bringing someone in that does that, because that is a hard thing to do internally, especially if they know nothing about agile. So I would start with that. But let's assume that it's an agile organization at this point.
Well, let's assume IT is capable of being agile, but our business customers and our business sponsorship isn't.
Yeah. Well, and if they're not, that's a great point too. It's training. It's bringing them into.
Go ahead.
It's training. It's bringing them into it, because if they do come into it blind, you're right. They're going through the same mind shift that you guys did. Imagine if someone had just said, the business had come to you in the same regard and said, I want you to be agile, and you didn't know anything about it. So it's the same. They have to be trained just the same, because it is different. And we have to remember, I was used to signing BRDs that were huge, and I knew everything was accounted for. And there was a certain, as much as it was nerve-wracking, there was a certain comfort level in it that they know everything I want, they're going to get it all done. And it was different for me to think, well, no, we just want to know what you want us to do for 2 weeks. You know, well, generally speaking, right? Just 2 weeks at a time. Once you get into that, it's actually a lot of fun, because I can change my mind every 2 weeks. Little by little, you're still going after the bigger vision.
I think that you might want to speak to this. There's a big difference between the business thinks this is another crazy IT thing and they're just going to ignore it until it goes away. And I want to do it, I just want to have it. And so I don't know if you want to talk to that, because there's a really big difference there depending on how it's business.
I think that you're right. I think the other piece is, I haven't done a very good job of dealing with my own business. We're really talking about a backlog of business, right? When I think about the size and stuff, the relative size and scale, 2 week sprints, being able to produce anything in that short amount of time in their mindset was just enhancements. I can't do anything significant if I'm just doing enhancements. And some of that translation is kind of
The way to go.
yeah.
And that's where this is good. Now, you're looking at these even as enhancements. Is that a concern?
Well, I'm just thinking about it in terms of how much work can I actually get done in 2 weeks or in 6 weeks, right? Relative to the types of things that they ask for, that's an enhancement. That's maybe a couple $100,000 tops that you can dedicate to doing something in that certain period of time, as opposed to I've got a $15 million whole system upgrade,
And then
and that takes 18 months. Right?
well, and that's where you put your list together. Now, we're talking about an application here, and you're talking a little bit different, but that's where you would start to categorize it. They might lean on IT for a lot of these categories. So let's talk about who's in the meeting when they're doing this. This is very business focused, so you might have all of your stakeholders, but you also need to have some level of IT knowledge in the room to know how big some of these might be, especially as you start to slot them. So you have your architects, you have maybe some lead developers. Have the knowledge in the room to know how big is something that you're asking and how much it needs to be sliced down. So, and how can you iterate it? As a business partner, I don't know sometimes how it's going to work that way, but the development team is who tells me, this is how we're going to slice it up. We're going to do it this way. You know, we're going to do this piece first. So if you go back to that video player, we have a plugin. We're going to put it on the homepage, and then the whole idea of 2 weeks is that we can get the plugin on the homepage and we can connect it to our CMS system. We can do that in 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, let's see what happens. And then the next week they might have enhanced it a bit. You know, let's say that we knew we wanted to have it according to, you know, if you saw it before, you don't see it now, right? So we would do that in the next 2 weeks. And then you would continue to add features to it. But make sure it's valuable when you break it down to. So what you didn't hear me say was, we're going to build a CMS system, which has no value to the user. Or we're going to stand up a database structure. So what you're doing is you're picking something small that you can do and actually see value in it. And I always say that when I'm working with teams, I say, if we run out of money and time, do you have something you can use? Because if all you have is a database table, you can't use that. So you do that in your tasking, and you might do it in certain scenarios that are just too difficult. But I'm trying to get to that point where you're working with something small. Because we could release with a plugin, right? But if we had been putting all of the CMS system in, and then just ran out of time, all we had was a CMS system that didn't plug into the plugin. Does that help? Seeing nods, but it's hard when it's not. I mean, when we're talking about specific, it's a little bit.
I think my gap in understanding, and I don't have the actual background,
Right.
is if you have a new application that you want to put out on the web, I don't see how it actually works out unless you come up with those requirements ahead of time, and then you can start building. Because in 2 weeks you can't put something out on your website when you're trying to build a whole new app. I just don't see how that works. So would you just keep the pieces of that code building together and then release at the end?
Yes.
So you would have multiple sprints?
and that was my fault for skipping over that. And this roadmap is different than your release schedule. You don't release at the end. You have shippable product, but you don't ship it at every sprint. And there's that difference, and that's a very good point. So remember my example earlier of saying all you got in the first demo was a success screen? We never would have shipped that to our customers. They wouldn't have found any value in seeing the word success. However, we achieved single sign-on, and we were able to iterate through building that application. The next sprint was making one of those success messages a real page, a real working portal. And then the next sprint was another portal, and you bring them up slowly. And then we release. So your first release, I mean, it's all over the board, I'm not going to say, but it's not uncommon to hear first release 6 to 12 months. I mean, or 6, 9 months, your very first release of a brand new greenfield application, depending on how complicated it is. But I'm not saying that that's normal either. You could release 1 month. I mean, it's all over the board. My point is, don't feel like it's you have to release at the end of every sprint very quickly. Now, once you get an application going and you're just adding features, then your releases start to become much smaller. And then you might have 1 month, every month you're releasing your
So
product.
then it becomes almost like an enhancement to that.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. I got it.
So if you're doing like an off-the-shelf, a new installation of a PaaS product, right? Your sprints could be configurations associated with individual modules. You could be releasing those modules into a SIT environment to start doing your end-to-end regression testing. But you don't necessarily turn that stuff on at the end of every sprint, but you're kind of creating backlog in a release environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And releases can happen different for different teams. So your team might be on a release train, or your organization might be on a release train where on January 15th we go, and on May 15th we go, and if you're on it, you're on it, and if you're off, you're off. And that's one way you're doing it. Some larger organizations will have that way. In Agile, they say you should be able to release whenever you want, and sometimes it's easier said than done. But the idea is, though, that you would have shippable product, and if you could release, you have it ready to go. It's tested, it's regression tested, have it to your user. But to your point, you let it pile up so you have something that's releasable and usable to them. Especially if you're doing it in modules, that's even better. You could do the first module, send it out. Second module, send it out. That might be one way that you release it.
Even those modules are broken down. Think of this AR system, receivable system, there's credit analysis, entry, there's all these little pieces that you can break that down, and now those pieces become part of the whole sprint. You have to get your operations people or your people that make the decisions on board with this is how we do things in IT. We have a sprint, so we're going to build you this thing, this funnel, whatever we can do in this funnel now. That's what we're going to deliver. And we'll show it to you when we're done. Then we're going to build the next thing. We'll show that to you. The demos.
Yeah,
Talk about it.
So is there a different approach to your testing cycles then? Because if I may be putting stuff out there, I'm going to be showing it to the customer, they're not going to be able to do true UAT if I don't have the other integration points set up in an environment that they can pull everything through. I may not be able to do all of my testing.
So we take that piece that we just developed, then it may feed into a larger piece of the new UAT end to end. Then you're doing regression testing on the larger pieces together. Sorry, I'm stealing your thing.
No, that's okay. I've seen UAT. Were you going to say something? Yeah. I was going to say UAT I've seen done on the release level. When you're about to release, you've piled up the code for your user acceptance testing, and then they're able to do a full UAT, and that is the code that goes to production. Now, that doesn't mean that developers stop coding. They're developing in the development environment and continuing to push through SID, and then once the release goes, you start piling up UAT again.
Question, I don't know the terminology of slot ethics. Ethics is what, one of the transportation manuals?
Yeah, so let's get back to it. No, that's okay. These are all great questions, because I think the release part was worth clarifying, and my apologies for missing that. So here's the releases. That's what your 4 columns are. So you're deciding, this is an example of a release train. These could be any, and because they're equal amount, you could have anything. You could have 10 here, you could have 2. You decide what your releases are as you're working through this exercise. But the idea is that epics and features. So features were what we did before. Those are your high level. Epics are breaking it down a little bit further. So let me show you. So air, before we just had one box for it. You had your booking now, you have your preferences, and then you also have your price alerts. Think about price alerts as something that's kind of extra, right? You don't have to have it in your release in order to go. So you have slotted that's now, this is 3 months of work. That's all that is. So you now have to break it down into 2 weeks. And so what I would say is the business and your high-level leadership team, they have figured out what they want in the release. Now it's up to the development team to slice it. The thing is, though, that you have to know what's going to be doable. So you have to collaborate with your IT team. You have to. That's where your leadership IT team helps. Architects help. Bring in that knowledge of how big is something typically. So you would do your epics here. You think you can get booking and preferences, and then the team helps you break it down and figure out what can and can't happen. There's no commitment here. Okay.
So that's my work package in a kind of a parlance. So an epic is a lower level slice of
Before you get the story.
your leads.
So you were reviewing and modifying often. Let's say that we completely missed the boat and all we can get in is booking. We can't even get in preferences. So you're reviewing this often. This is not a commitment. This is an estimation. This is a plan. And then as it changes, you're not going through change orders. You're not going through red status, right? You're constantly talking to your business partners to figure out, okay, we're a little bigger than we thought we were. We might be smaller than we thought we were. And you're constantly changing this. Make it very visible. Make it very easy to move around. It doesn't always completely shift. You know, they don't always change their mind big picture. But the idea is that if something became bigger in release 1 and they're kind of behind schedule, someone in the last session said I might affect someone downstream, they might have to cut some ideas that they had. Maybe we never do price alerts. Maybe that goes away because we got the bulk of it and we would prefer to move on with some of these pieces. And so you're constantly shifting the work and being able to look at it as a leadership team. It's not just a business making these decisions, it's IT helping them understand the impact of how big what they're asking for is, how long it'll take. Do we have the skill sets for what you're asking for? We might have to put something later because we have to bring in a new skill set. There's all sorts of factors that Oscar's out of his head. I'm sure he can even think of many, many more. But as from the business side, these are things that I hear, and you have to bend and mold to just as much as they are my priority.
Question. I don't work in IT. I'm not in Agile. I've been to a few sessions and taken some classes, so I'm still learning this. I'm curious to, coming from, and I don't work in organization development either, culture change, when you talk about getting an Agile approach, when you talk about a huge shift of different groups of people from bigger to smaller chunks, do you find in businesses or you, or you can take this offline, that the organization development people need to be really involved in addition to an Agile approach to get the stakeholders or the sponsors or the leadership or your own IT team to think differently? Maybe that's a completely different session, I don't know, but you find that the IT people appreciate the OD people coming in and saying, hey, we're going to do something different and da-da-da-da. It's like, unless you're out, get out of my face, this is what we're doing. Is that a different session? Is this a fair question now? Tell me now or later.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, I want to toss it to both of you, if you don't mind. Just from the executive coaching perspective, I think it really starts at that level of being able to get the executive buy-in and for everyone, not involved, not just one side telling the other side. Because if you don't have that, that's a critical aspect. So back to the question of, IT is ready for Agile, but business not. That's something that has to be addressed early on. It's not something you can just, teach them as you go.
And is it the people that do that, or is there a special group of people?
That's the part I'm going to pass.
Or the Agile coaches
You have more
typically
experience
in their
in that.
industry who make that stuff happen?
No, we're fine. We're fine.
I don't want to take any more. Typically, bring in outsiders. Outsiders with IT organizational development change involved. They need to be trained as well to help understand the changes that goes into it. The most successful transformations happen at the executive level first. Honestly, they're saying, hey, we're going to do this. We're signing up for this. This is what we need to do. And then as an organization, figure out how to implement
remember that if you're going to go agile, everyone has to go agile at the same time. Because when we spoke to releases, I work in IT, so we're releasing information, but then we have these projects that are waterfall. It's like, oh, I can't develop these because I'm on this agile project, and if I do your code, it's going to mess up this code. So we had to delay projects because everyone was not on the same one. So it's a huge, huge change, and I don't think too many people are following it.
It still happens. It's very common.
Change is very hard.
Just to add to that, bring everyone along, that includes HR, that includes finance, that includes facilities, that includes, because if you want to work co-located, you have to change the way you do it. You're looking at cost versus expense versus capitalized, finance here.
Or squeezing people, trying to squeeze your development team and those people together in the same conference room, right? Because it becomes a campground.
HR is involved with really bringing in skill sets. You're going to be changing how people work, and you have to change how you break it up, right?
So say, it's been my experience, sorry.
It has that covered in like the session I'm doing, the covering a little bit of that in the organization behind HR side.
Yeah, let's break. Or unless you're.
I'll just be really brief. Yes, if the whole organization goes agile, that's effective, but even if you have that commitment, it takes years.
Yeah, it does actually.
So.
I'm glad you're covering that, because I don't want to cut off. We have about 5 minutes left, and I think that just gives me just enough time. So one thing that you do notice is this is broken out, and this is not, like we talked about that earlier. So think about it from a business and a project management perspective. This is what you're keeping an eye on, because as you start to get through the first release, if this isn't breaking down and not getting ready for the team, that's where you're really looking for your product owner, your BAs, and even just if there's others that are involved in the decision making, really pushing them to get ready. This is why BAs and product owners have to be dedicated. This is a constant process. And so if they are going off and doing other projects, they're not going to have it ready. They can sometimes have it ready on day 1 for release 1, and then the team starts running. And when they are running through a sprint, they go faster than you'll ever realize. Those of you that work realize that. I think that surprises the business sometimes because they're used to waiting 6 months. They're used to waiting a period of time, and they think they have time. And so it's really looking and saying, okay, now what are we going to do in the next release? Starting to break it down. You're also, not only that, you're looking at the next release, but you're taking into account what you accomplished in the first release. And it might have changed your mind. It might have changed your ability to get certain things done. Things might have become bigger in release 1. So all of these things are constantly shifting, and that is why they say a dedicated team. And it truly is from all levels dedication to the product, because you are running in such small increments, and you're resetting so fast, and that focus is what is needed. And that's where the Scrum Master is so critical, because they're making sure that focus stays on the project, not getting distracted, not going and looking at other things. If something gets in the way, let's say that in order to go to hotels, we have to integrate with another part of the business. They're helping facilitate, or at least raise the concern that they need to bring certain people to the table to talk about that integration point. It might be outside vendors that have to come in. And it's not so much always the responsibility of the Scrum Master. They're just watching. Are these conversations happening? And if they're not, raising the awareness, getting the right people in the room, and getting them prepared. But of course, you're also working on a day-to-day basis. And so what is the team going to do? So we have these high-level plans, and this is the level that you get down to sprint planning. So you have your backlog, you had your force rank of all of your features, and then you decided what you're going to put in each release, which is what we just saw, and now you're going into each sprint. And when you come to transition, I like to actually include the development team as much as possible into that, depending on how large the epics are, help them figure out what the slices are. It might be just 1 or 2 development team members, but bringing into grooming. You're talking about how big the stories are, getting them small enough for the team, make sure they understand what's coming, but also make sure they understand what the bigger picture is. They're not just getting stories fed to them every 2 weeks, but they actually understood that big roadmap and what you're going towards, and that they have a lot of stories that add up to a certain feature, or a lot of stories that add up to a certain value, and they're all working towards that as a group. Because then they can shift. If they run into an impediment, they have that opportunity to change direction, because they know what the direction, the ultimate goal was. And so it's really bringing them in. That's why I like to have them there to break it down, because they know what the overall goal was to start with, and they can help bring perspective to the steps that should be taken. And then as you move through, like I said, one of the things that I like to do is keep the roadmap visible. a visually appealing, something that's easy to see. I used to have stakeholders that would print it off and put it in their desk. I mean, I've seen some massive spreadsheets that that sometimes is what you have to do, I understand, but just keep it visible. Make sure everyone understands what it is and what they're moving and what kind of they're trading in and out as they look. Because this is a constant moving and evolving working document, not a set plan. So we have about 2 minutes left, so we did actually pretty well with our questions.
Can you show that other slide? You just had a,
Oh, which one?
no, the one with the product back there.
This one?
No.
Unless I hit it by accident, yeah. So one thing, from a product owner perspective, they should be looking 2 to 3 sprints in advance. So as much as, team's working on a sprint, and then you know what you're going to do the next sprint, and you have a good idea of the following. And that's a lot of work to kind of keep going and keep moving. So kind of keep an eye out for that, because it'll catch up quick, I'll say.
So the roadmap is just the purpose of what we're going to expect to accomplish in the next 1 year.
It's a very good way of saying it. It's not a commitment. Yeah.
Forecast is one word I heard used.
Yeah. As long as it doesn't have ramifications for not being met. I've heard forecasts be held accountable to
Okay.
like forecast dollar or something like that. Yeah, I mean, the idea is that it's not a commitment. The team just knows what they're working towards and adjusting. You might have to lose some features to keep on track.
To that point, I have to imagine that for the most part, we've got a pretty stable capacity, right? As you move through all this.
Yeah,
So
actually.
forecasting, at least financial forecasting, should be pretty straightforward.
Oh yeah, I just meant you hear those words forecast and financing and think they're stable. They're commitments. Where I was saying, so if you use it in this capacity, you might send the wrong message. You're right though. From a forecast of dollars, you are pretty.
Well, if I'm forecasting spend, if I'm forecasting spend cycles, I mean, I've got a pretty consistent capacity, and I'm planning based on my capacity as opposed to planning based on something else, right? That actually has more variability. It should be seen as forecasting more straightforward.
You're talking about the team that has predictable and how we're going to make it work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've got predictable teams that are delivering. You can actually then plan out from capacity how much am I going to get done. Right. The team does 100 points a sprint. That's not something that.
And your capitalization estimates everything would be much more straightforward.
Much more predictable. Absolutely. You can see, am I going to get these features done based on the roadmap and how big is that feature? And how long is it? Yes. Exactly.
Keyword was predictable things. You don't get predictable for a while as you develop as a team.
Sure.
It takes time to gel, and then you can say, yeah, we're a 40-20 team. Everybody, so we're a 60-20 team.
Yeah,
And it takes a while to
Yeah,
develop.
it's a 10 sprint. So you should get it fairly quick in the project. But that's the point too. So if you think about release 1, you might be more guessing there, but what comes next has a little bit more predictability.
What a huge hit for that whole part of the survey.
All right, we are out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.